Audio presents One Click, Jeff Bezos and the Rise of Amazon.com by Richard L. Brandt. This book is read by Neil Shaw. To Kim and Layla, for everything. To Al Zuckerman, for being a great agent. To Courtney Young, for being a great editor. And to the memory of Linda Howe, who always had faith in me. Chapter 1. One click is not enough. To be Earth's most customer-centric company, where people can find and discover anything they want to buy online. Amazon.com mission statement. On September 22, 1994, 2 months after incorporating Amazon.com and 10 months before launching the company, Jeff Bezos decided to learn how to sell books. So he took a course on how to start a bookstore, sponsored by the American Booksellers Association. Some 40 to 50 aspiring booksellers, from young people starting out to retired couples thinking about a second career, attended the 4-day course at the Benson Hotel in Portland. They sat through courses on topics such as bookstore financial operations, customer service, and handling inventory. One of the instructors was Richard Howarth, owner of Square Books in Oxford, Mississippi. Howarth is a fanatic about customer service, which happens to be the only way to compete with Amazon.com and the chain stores to this day. To emphasize the importance of service, he related the story of his most extreme example of taking care of a customer. One of the store's managers walked into Howarth's upstairs office to tell him a customer had a complaint. Howarth strolled downstairs to find out what the problem was. The customer angrily told him that she had parked her car in front of the store, and dirt from potted plants on the store's balcony had somehow fallen on her car. So Howarth offered to wash her car for her. They climbed into her car and drove to a service station with a car wash. But the service station was closed for repairs. She became more irate. Howarth then suggested they drive to his house, where he collected a bucket, soap, and a hose and washed the car himself. As she drove him back to the store, her attitude changed. She became downright pleasant. In fact, she came back to the store later that afternoon and bought a bunch of books. Bezos later told an executive at the American Booksellers Association that he was impressed with the story and was determined to make customer service the cornerstone of Amazon.com. Bezos considered it his most important weapon. We know that if we can keep our competitors focused on us, while we stay focused on the customer, that ultimately will turn out all right, he has said. Interestingly, Jeff's idea of customer service is different than that held by Howarth, who says personal, face-to-face service with the customer is what's most important. In the internet game, customer service is mostly done by unemotional computers. I'll bet he hasn't washed a customer's car, Howarth says of Bezos, perhaps with just a touch of bitterness. In fact, for all his professed dedication to serving the customer, Bezos' obsession seems to be restricted to building an incredible website and to making sure deliveries arrive when promised. It's hard to even find a customer service number on Amazon.com. Bezos wants everything to be done via email. Amazon's customer service started with Bezos himself answering the emails, and by 1999 was manned by 500 of these customer care representatives packed into cubicles and tied to their telephones and email accounts to answer questions from customers. The people handling these emails are generally overqualified, underpaid people with no experience in bookselling. From the beginning, disaffected academics were popular because they were well-read and could supposedly help find books on a huge variety of topics. They were paid about $10 to $13 an hour, but with the potential of promotions and stock options dangled before their glazed eyes. Not everyone found nirvana in this environment. Richard Howard, for example, has a master's degree in literature, but decided to take the entry-level customer care job at Amazon in 1998, with hopes of moving into editorial, where he could write reviews of books. What he found was a work mill with 4 customer service Tier 1 email representatives to a cubicle. Supervisors listened in on calls to monitor performance, and rated the workers by how many emails or phone calls they could answer per minute. Howard chronicled his experience for a Seattle newspaper in an article titled, "How I Escaped from Amazon.Cult." Human interaction was treated almost as a necessary evil. Howard was given a blurb index, a list of hundreds of short, canned answers to cover virtually any question a customer might ask, which he felt were designed to create a blandly conventional zone of contact between Amazon's agents and customers. When Howard got a call from a customer one day asking how to find a copy of James Michener's Centennial, because the customer was interested in Civil War-era fiction, Howard suggested Gore Vidal's Lincoln as a better alternative, just the type of thing a knowledgeable employee in a good bookstore might do. Howard spent 3 or 4 minutes on the call, he said, and was reprimanded by his supervisor. After 3.5 weeks on the job, he was fired for not being productive enough. He took a contract job at Microsoft instead. What the starry-eyed customer service representatives with visions of huge stock options found when starting their jobs at Amazon was long hours and options for just 100 Amazon shares, as long as they performed well for 3 years. The best could answer a dozen emails a minute. Those who dropped below 7 were often fired. The Washington Post did an expose of this dark side of Amazon and quoted one customer service rep as saying, "We're supposed to care deeply about customers, provided we can care deeply about them at an incredible rate of speed." The customer service reps also had to learn the Unix software system the company used, and had to take a 3-week training course at Amazon to learn how everything worked, including how orders for books were submitted, how they were delivered to the warehouse, how they were shelved, how to match orders to the packed books, and how to choose the best shipping method. The most frequent questions came from people who needed help ordering a book on the site or wanted to know where the book they had ordered was. But Bezos knew he would never be able to offer the kind of service one gets from a physical store staffed by human helpers. "We're never going to have sofas. We're never going to have lattes," he told Businessweek magazine in June 1997. Where Bezos really managed to shine was in creating a great online experience with very little human interaction with customers. The site had to be simple, fast, and intuitive. It had to offer an unprecedented number of books at the cheapest price possible and deliver them quickly. The whole thing just had to work without problems so that people left the site happy. That seems to be enough for most people. When we do make a customer unhappy at some point, Bezos was later to explain, these people come out of the woodwork and say, "Well, actually, that wasn't my experience." Word of mouth is very powerful. That's especially true on the internet, where word of mouth is viral. On the internet, says Bezos, everybody is a publisher. They blog and they email, and they can turn nasty very quickly. Email, he says, has some magical ability to turn off the politeness gene in the human being. You get these very candid pieces of feedback that tell you exactly how you can improve your service. If I walk into a restaurant and am served a bad meal, I just leave. I never go find the chef and grab him by the collar and say, "You know, you really shouldn't be cooking." But there have been a few occasions when emails and words spread virally through the internet were intended to grab Bezos by his virtual collar to yell at him. Bezos has not always anticipated what it means to provide great customer service. In the early days, Amazon had a policy of emptying out customers' shopping carts if they remained idle for 30 days. It seemed reasonable at the time to assume the customer wasn't going to buy the items, an assumption that turned out to be wrong. One customer sent an angry email saying that he had spent hours filling the online cart with items he wanted, then suddenly found one day that his basket had been emptied without any warning. In his email, he said it was a stupid policy. The programmers went back to the files in the database and recovered the items for him. They also eliminated the 30-day deletion practice. It probably was a stupid policy, Bezos was later to admit in a speech. Sometimes the company was not able to live up to its promises. In the early days, The overworked staff might miss the promised shipping dates. In order to make up for it, the shipping costs would be refunded whenever a customer complained. As Amazon grew, Bezos' dedication to doing what's right for the customer began to slip. He often caught hell for it from customers and had to recant. In 1998, reporters discovered that Amazon had started charging publishers $10,000 to feature books on its home page under headings such as New and Notable and Destined for Greatness, with heavy editorial support from Amazon, including a profile of or interview with the author. Bezos reportedly told his staff it was okay to put placement up for bids. "If Publisher X gives us a better deal on a new title than Publisher Y," said Bezos, "and we predict that the customer is going to like both of these books equally, but there's only a slot to show one, let's show the one where we make more money." So what's the big deal? After all, bookstores have long accepted payola to give prime real estate in their stores to new titles. But this was Amazon, the company about which Bezos has boasted, "We may be the most customer-obsessed company to ever occupy planet Earth." This was the company that was supposed to always put customers first, offering the best titles to suit their tastes. Who's to say that the customer would like both of these books equally, when it comes to a choice between one that will make the company extra money and one that won't? That slope is as slippery as an eel in oil. After the practice hit the press and customers started complaining to Amazon in a barrage of emails, Bezos decided that full disclosure was the best policy. Amazon started posting notices next to prominently placed books when publishers paid for the placement. When that decision was announced, Bezos was sure to point out that Amazon was the only bookseller that made this disclosure. He also promised to refund any books customers had bought on the basis of these recommendations. Also in 1999, customers began realizing just how much information Amazon was collecting about their book purchases, tastes, and foibles. It came to light after Amazon bought a small online service called Planet All, which would cross-reference book sales with people's zip codes and email addresses. Amazon used the information to recommend books to people who the service determined would have similar tastes and interests. Bezos had to do a partial about-face on this one as well, offering a way for buyers to opt out of the data sharing program. Today, nobody seems to mind, or think about, the fact that Amazon recommends books based on data from others with similar tastes. The privacy debate has shifted to Google and Facebook, although those companies are probably no bigger offenders than Amazon. From the beginning, it was very important to Bezos to make people think he did belong on the internet selling things. So he had to make sure he would impress them. The company might send a hardcover book at the paperback price when the softcover version the customer ordered was out of stock. Also, 2 years after launching, Bezos created an out-of-print division to search for orphan books. Customers were amazed that they could find such books at Amazon, but nowhere else. Bezos wants to use technology to provide great service to customers. That philosophy resulted in what is perhaps Amazon's most famous and infamous patented software program known as one-click ordering. The one-click software was written mostly by a programmer named Perry Hartman, who joined Amazon in 1997. Hartman was given the task of working on the software that would be the interface to the customers, including the ordering system they would use to buy books. Hartman recalls that, one day over lunch with Bezos and Shel Kapan, the head of software development, Bezos told them, "We need something to make the ordering system frictionless. We need to make it so the customer can order products with the least amount of effort. They should be able to click on one thing, and it's done." A simple idea on simplicity, and Hartman took it literally. He set to work creating a program that would require just one click to order a product. His name appeared first on the patent application, which became patent number US 5960411. The patent filing was titled innocuously enough. Method and system for placing a purchase order via a communications network. More telling was the label in an illustrated flowchart in the patent. Enable single action ordering. In fact, it is a simple idea. The 19-page patent filing is made up mostly of flowchart diagrams that show the sequence of events that enable buyers to place an order with a single click. Retrieve the buyer's identification and payment methods when they first place an order, enter it into the system, and the next time they look up a book, they'll see a one-click ordering button on the buyer's page. Sound like a no-brainer? That's what Amazon's competitors thought. Many people in technology hate this type of broad patent, known as a process patent, since it mainly describes the process of doing something that is, well, patently obvious. In this case, reducing to 1 the number of clicks needed to make a purchase. That is, however, the kind of attention to detail that has helped make Amazon.com a success. Jeff Bezos will do anything he can think of to make the process of using Amazon.com easier. The genius is that Bezos thought of it first. He knew that doing anything online had to be simple in an age when people were becoming overwhelmed by complicated computers, software, and internet technology. This, in fact, was a principle that Larry Page and Sergey Brin adopted a couple years later when creating Google. But few competitors have had the sense to follow this rule. Even today, most websites seem to be confusing morasses of text, graphics, videos, flashing ads, and a tangled string of links. Amazon.com doesn't match the simplicity of Google's famously spare site, but it is well designed and easy to navigate. His general philosophy was to be friendly to customers, recalls Hartman. The focus should be on the customer, not on the website. It's pretty obvious that a simple website is easier to use than one with a bunch of fancy gadgets. He was adamant about that. His goal was not just to make browsing for books easy, but an enjoyable experience. People don't just buy books because they need books, he has said. There are products like that. Pharmaceuticals are that way. Nobody enjoys browsing the preparation H counter, but people will gladly spend hours in a bookstore, so you have to make the shopping experience fun and engaging. It didn't require a free online latte to make customers appreciate Amazon.com. In the late 1990s, there was so much room for improvement in website design that any incremental advancement was like getting an extra bottle of oxygen on a trek to the top of Mount Everest. To be 9 times bigger than your nearest competitor, Jeff explained to the Washington Post in 1998, you actually only have to be 10% better. 3 years after the site was launched, he said that the majority of his customers came to the site not because of advertising, but because of positive word of mouth. From the beginning of his company to the present day, Bezos has been fanatical about squeezing out every incremental percentage point of usefulness in Amazon.com. They're often simple things like the one-click feature and, later, a one-click button to designate a gift and have it wrapped. He won't wash a customer's car. There are too many customers for Amazon to provide individual attention. But he's happy to implement new policies if they will help all customers. When one elderly woman sent an email to the company saying she loved ordering books from the site, but had to wait for her nephew to come over and tear into the difficult-to-open packaging, Bezos had the packaging redesigned to make it easier to open. These customer services are often met with resistance. When the site launched, he started allowing customers to review books on the site, positive or negative. People thought he was crazy for allowing negative reviews. It's not exactly something to help sell books, at least not in the short run. But because bad reviews were allowed as well as good, customers learned they could rely on Amazon.com to point them to books that wouldn't disappoint them, at least to a certain extent. Friends and family of authors often help out with reviews on Amazon to help kickstart sales. Negative reviews are usually genuine, unless posted by an author with a competing title. Very early on, Bezos started adding bestseller lists on Amazon. By 1998, Amazon customers could see where books ranked on any of 2,000 different lists. One of Bezos' favorite stories is that of a book called Endurance by Alfred Lansing. It's a real-life adventure tale about polar explorer Ernest Shackleton, whose ship was crushed by an ice floe. He and his 28 men all survived after a 6-month trek hiking out of Antarctica. It was originally published in 1956. In 1998, it ended up as one of the top 100 best-selling books on Amazon. Its popularity, he said, was strictly fed by these customer reviews. Today, a paperback version published in 1999 is still being sold on the site, ranking within the top 2,000 bestsellers on the site, as well as number 1 in history books about polar regions and number 1 among travel books about Antarctica. And, of course, discounts are a big reason for the company's success. By 1998, he was discounting 400,000 best-selling titles, and his customer base had grown to 3.1 million people using the site. But he does not use discounts alone to attract customers. By collecting data on which books customers bought and comparing that to books bought by customers with similar tastes, Amazon's computers can recommend books that others may not have found otherwise. Bezos believes that he can keep improving that technology to outdo recommendations in the best bookstores. In a speech in 1998, he described it as a steadily improving technology. So what we think we can do is use advanced technology, like collaborative filtering and other things, to accelerate that discovery process, so that if today you have a 1 in 1,000 chance when you go in a bookstore of stumbling on something that blows you away, we want to use technology to get to know you as an individual, and then make that a 1 in 300 chance, then a 1 in 100 chance, and then work a few more years on it and make it a 1 in 50 chance, and so on and so on. That will create huge value for people. Great merchants have never had the opportunity to understand their customers in a truly individualized way. E-commerce is going to make that possible. Another feature, added in October 2001, is Look Inside the Book. Not all publishers or authors like the idea of letting people read some of the book before buying it. Even worse, 2 years later he added Search Inside the Book, allowing people to pick out only the topics they're interested in without paying a cent. It's a great research tool for college students, but doesn't bring in revenues for either the publishers or Amazon.com. It does, however, create enormous goodwill and brings people back to the site. Some of them end up buying that book or others on the site. The one-click patent, however, created the most controversy, one that lasted for more than a decade. The reason is that anyone else trying to sell anything online is prohibited from adding a one-click purchasing option, unless they want to pay a royalty to Amazon. The patent was written broadly enough that competitors were prevented not only from imitating the code, but from adding a single-click feature at all, regardless of how they made it happen. There are simply not very many ways to add the feature, and none of the approaches are unique enough to avoid violating the patent. This kind of patent might be compared to filing a patent for a plastic toy that locks out any competitor who might want to make, say, a disc with a curved edge which can be thrown long distances by tossing and spinning it. Even the inventor of the Frisbee flying disc, Walter Frederick Morrison, improved on the Frisbee pie pans that were first used for that purpose by describing a specific shape to the curved rim. That shape, called the Morrison slope, improved distance and accuracy of the thrown disc. Morrison still managed to make about $1 million in royalties from his design despite many competitors. The one-click patent was granted by the United States Patent and Trademark Office in September 1999. After it was granted, it attracted enormous derision from those creating retail sites on the Internet, as well as advocates of patent reform. Patents are supposed to be granted only for non-obvious inventions. How much thinking does it take to figure out how to cut the ordering process to a single click? Legal experts began referring to it as the notorious patent. An article in one law journal described it as probably the most memorable example of an unoriginal software patent. Technology book publisher and open-source advocate Tim O'Reilly described that patent as one more example of an intellectual property milieu gone mad. In an open letter to Bezos, published online, he said that the patent fails to meet even the most rudimentary tests for novelty and non-obviousness to an expert in the field, and would stifle creativity on the Internet. He asked people to sign a petition to get Bezos to give up the patent. The legal battle was slow and furious and wasn't resolved until 2009. In the meantime, Barnes & Noble tried to get around the patent. Amazon owned one click. Well, B&N decided 2 clicks were almost as good as one. In May 1998, it introduced its own fast checkout system called Express Lane, which simply added a second click. After customers clicked on the Express Purchase button, a second button popped up asking the buyer to click again to confirm the purchase. Jeff Bezos was not amused or taken in by the tactic. 3 months after his patent was granted, he sued B&N for patent infringement. "We spent thousands of hours to develop our one-click process," he said in a press release. "And the reason we have a patent system in this country is to encourage people to take these kinds of risks and make these kinds of investments for customers." Barnes & Noble fired back with its own press release, insisting that the suit was a desperate attempt to retaliate for our growing market share in online book selling. It didn't specify exactly how fast that share of market was growing. By 2010, Barnes & Noble was suffering, while Amazon.com is as strong as ever. In response to Amazon.com's lawsuit against Barnes & Noble, the Free Software Foundation, an advocacy group that promotes open-source software and is staunchly against software patents, called for a boycott against Amazon.com. That didn't work either. In December 1999, a district court in Washington state upheld Amazon's patent, issuing a preliminary injunction preventing Barnes & Noble from using Express Lane. The appeal took several years. Finally, in 2002, Barnes & Noble settled the suit with Amazon.com. Although terms were not disclosed, Barnes & Noble was finally able to put its fast purchase method on its site. Apple Computer took the easy route. In 2000, it licensed the one-click patent from Amazon.com and put the capability on its iTunes store. Ironically, even Bezos himself now argues against trivial patents. Influenced by O'Reilly, he has traveled with the technology publisher to Washington, D.C., to argue that patent rules should be tightened. The two men even co-founded a Boston company called Bounty Quest, which offered rewards for evidence of prior art, or documents that prove that someone else thought of the idea first for a disputed patent. One of the patents for which it offered a reward was the one-click patent. It's part of the enigma that is Jeff Bezos. Preach restraint, but if you can get away with something that improves customer service and the company's competitive edge, do it regardless of who complains. To be sure, Bounty Quest also noted that its service could also be used to validate patents when no prior art was discovered. Bounty Quest paid out money to 3 prior art submissions in an attempt to invalidate the one-click patent, but none of them proved strong enough to challenge the Amazon patent. Bounty Quest later closed down without any significant successes. The strongest challenge, raised several years after Bounty Quest folded, came from a New Zealand actor named Peter Calverley, who was one of the actors hired to act out motions that were filmed and used to create computer-animated creatures for the Lord of the Rings movies. Calverley decided, just on a lark, to look for prior art to challenge the one-click patent. He found it, from a defunct online e-commerce company called DigiCash. Armed with that information, the Patent Office ordered a re-examination of the one-click patent in May 2006. That attempt failed as well. Finally, in March 2010, the Patent Office upheld the one-click patent for good, or at least until the patent expires. a stroke of exceptional luck for Bezos. The patent office will often rescind a patent if it seems that the patent is obvious or too broad. This time it didn't. Perhaps it depends on which individual in the patent office is doing the review. Some people feel that getting the patent upheld was like winning a crapshoot. Bezos is still trying to enhance his luck with newer and wilder ideas. One click, it seems, is a step, not an endpoint. In June 2008, Amazon.com filed for a new patent, with a Microsoft Kinect-like feature for making purchases with body movements. Anticipating computers and other devices that can track a user's movements, the new Amazon patent is titled Movement Recognition as Input Mechanism. Forget keypads and mice. You may soon be able to make a purchase simply by nodding your head at your computer, Kindle, or cell phone. Industry wags have dubbed it the one-nod patent. It doesn't stop there, of course. You may be able to indicate such requests as how many copies of an item to order by holding up fingers, or create a password from specific motions. The patent application gives an example. The user could set a password to 3 nods up and down, followed by a smile and 2 eyebrow raises. This patent lists Bezos himself as the sole inventor. This illustrates 2 of the most important principles of an entrepreneur. Always put the customer first, even if it appears to require a decision that would decrease revenues. It's a winning strategy in the long run, and in order to get an advantage from those decisions, think of the future, not the present, even if that future still seems to be years off. Just thinking of the idea may bring about that future more quickly. Your competitors may hate you for it, but customers will be impressed, or at least get a good laugh. Innovations and new patents at Amazon will never cease. In December 2010, word leaked out about a new patent for a system that enables people who get gifts through Amazon to return them even before they arrive in the mail. If Aunt Mildred has a habit of sending unwanted gifts, the patent says, the site will include an option to convert all gifts from Aunt Mildred. Yes, the patent includes the name of the presumably fictitious relative. It allows the receiver to track when the well-meaning relative buys a gift for him and change it to something more desirable before it ships. Gift recipients can also apply other rules selected from the gift conversion rules wizard, such as no clothes with wool, or convert any gift from Aunt Mildred to a gift certificate, but only after checking with me. The patent lists Bezos as the inventor. Of course, those who dictate what constitutes proper etiquette believe such a system is in appallingly bad taste. This idea totally misses the spirit of gift-giving, sniffs Anna Post, the great-great-granddaughter of etiquette maven Emily Post and spokeswoman for the Emily Post Institute. Bezos thinks it will improve gift-giving whether or not the giver is offended. In some cases, concern that the gift recipient may not like a particular gift may cause the person sending the gift to be more cautious in gift selection, the patent notes. But the idea is not only something that could please the fussy recipient, it can save Amazon millions of dollars. When a gift is returned, Amazon warehouse workers have to unpack and reshelf the old gifts and wrap, pack, and ship the new ones. And it does fit in with Bezos' desire to stay ahead with unusual innovation, a desire that has generally served the company very well. Of course, a keen intellect, a drive to succeed, and an innate stubbornness to the point of absurdity helps. These are all signs of a born entrepreneur. Chapter 2. Portrait of an Entrepreneur as a Young Man. Work hard, have fun, make history. Amazon Company slogan. Jeffrey Preston Bezos was 4 years old when he first arrived at his grandfather's cattle ranch in Cotulla, Texas. The Lazy G is a sprawling 25,000-acre spread in the southwest part of the state, an unspoiled habitat of mesquite and oak trees, the home of white-tailed deer, popular among local hunters, wild turkeys, doves, quail, feral hogs, and sheep. Jeff's family's Texas roots date back to the 19th century, when his ancestor, Colonel Robert Hall, left his home in Tennessee for San Antonio. Colonel Hall was an imposing man, 6 feet 4 inches tall, and in his later years had taken to wearing a colorful outfit stitched together from dozens of different types of animal pelts. When he walked down the streets of San Antonio, the crowds would part, said Jackie Bezos, Jeff's mother. It was her great-grandfather, Bernard Vesper, who acquired the Lazy G. Jeff's maternal grandfather, Lawrence Preston Geiss, was imposing in his own way, a just-retired rocket scientist who was ready to trade in his missile research for the simple and demanding life at the ranch. He's married to Maddie Louise Strait, who is related to country singer George Strait. He then wanted to share that life with his grandson. From that time on, Jeff spent every summer at the ranch until he was 16 years old. The Lazy G became a second home to the boy. Over the years, Jeff learned to clean stalls, to brand and castrate cattle, to install plumbing, and to handle other ranch hand tasks. One day, his grandfather towed in a dilapidated D6 Caterpillared bulldozer with a stripped transmission. Fixing it would be tough. He would have to remove a 500-pound gear from the engine. No problem, he simply built himself a small crane. Jeff helped. To Bezos, fixing tractors and castrating cattle was what I considered to be an idyllic childhood. Years later, after becoming a hugely successful entrepreneur, Bezos said that his experience on the ranch helped sow the seeds of his entrepreneurial drive. One of the things that you learn in a rural area like that is self-reliance, he said. People do everything themselves. That kind of self-reliance is something you can learn, and my grandfather was a huge role model for me. If something is broken, let's fix it. To get something new done, you have to be stubborn and focused, to the point that others might find unreasonable. His mother echoed that sentiment. You become really self-sufficient when you work with the land, she said. One of the things Jeff learned is that there really aren't any problems without solutions. Obstacles are only obstacles if you think they're obstacles. Otherwise, they're opportunities. There's little doubt that genetics also played a role in his success. Bezos idolized his grandfather, his first mentor and role model. Preston Geiss, Pops to Jeff, had worked on space technology and missile defense systems at the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, a research unit of the U.S. Defense Department. DARPA also happens to be the organization that created ARPANET, the mysterious computer network that was later to evolve into the ubiquitous Internet. In 1964, the year Jeff was born, Pops Geiss became manager of the Atomic Energy Commission's Western Region, supervising 26,000 employees at the Sandia, Los Alamos, and Lawrence Livermore laboratories. When he retired, he traded his demanding work designing missiles and nuclear technology for the even more demanding life of a gentleman rancher. Virtually nothing is known about Bezos's biological father, even by Jeff himself. Jeff was born Jeffrey Preston Jorgensen on January 12, 1964, in Albuquerque, New Mexico. His mother, Jacqueline "Jackie" Geiss Jorgensen, an attractive square-jawed brunette, was a 17-year-old recent bride working at a local bank. But his teenage father divorced his mother and left the family when Jeff was about 18 months old. His absent biological father faded into a nonentity in Jeff's life. I've never been curious about him, Bezos has said. The only time it comes up is in the doctor's office, when I'm asked for my medical history. I put down that I just don't know. My real father is the guy who raised me. Fortunately, his mother was much more successful in love the second time around. She might thank Fidel Castro for that. When Castro came to power in 1959, his regime frightened many Cuban parents into sending their children to the United States. Miguel Mike Bezos, the last name being a variation of Bezos, the Spanish word for kisses, was one of those children. In 1962, at age 15, he was flown to Miami by the Catholic Welfare Bureau as part of a rescue mission called Operation Peter Pan. He arrived with nothing but the clothes he was wearing and an extra shirt and pair of pants, and was shuffled off to a Catholic mission in Delaware with 15 other young refugees. If life was difficult in an orphanage, alone and far from home, Mike Bezos didn't show it. He thrived in his new country. He mastered English quickly, graduated from high school, and headed to New Mexico to study engineering at the University of Albuquerque. He also took a job at a local bank, where he met Jackie, who was, at that time, still pregnant with Jeff. Mike married Jackie when Jeff was about 4 years old. Mike adopted Jeff, giving him his name and becoming his true father. Jeff's sister, Christina, was born in 1969, and his brother, Mark, a year later. Jeff didn't learn that he and his siblings had different fathers until he was 10 years old. Mike Bezos also showed strong drive and determination. He got his degree and became a petroleum engineer at Exxon. The family followed where several job promotions took him: Houston, Pensacola, Florida, Miami. Despite repeated moves, they were a very close, extended family. Pop's Geiss's stubbornness was inherited by Jeff. When Jeff was 3 years old, his mother still had him sleeping in a crib. At that age, he could no longer abide that. "I want a real bed," he announced to his mother. As a young mother concerned about her child's safety, she said no. They argued, but she refused to give in, until the day she walked into his bedroom to find him dismantling his crib with a screwdriver, and decided he was old enough for a real bed after all. Jeff was born with a mind capable of tenacious focus. At the Montessori elementary school he attended, he would get so absorbed in whatever task lay before him that his teachers had to pick up his chair with him in it to move him to a different task at a different table. The doggedness of a future entrepreneur was bred into his brain. His mother and grandfather indulged his early interest in technology and tinkering with electronic gadgets and kits. "I think single-handedly we kept many Radio Shacks in business," she would later recall. Jeff spent hours in his garage, rebuilding Heathkit radios, tinkering with robots, and building experimental devices. He wrapped an umbrella spine in aluminum foil for a solar cooking experiment, and even tried to build a hovercraft from an ancient Hoover vacuum. A kid who valued his privacy, he rigged up an electric alarm to warn him if his younger siblings were trying to enter his room. Perhaps because he was influenced by his time at the Lazy G, his first career aspiration, at about age 6, was to be an archaeologist. He's been known to say, "I would like to point out this was before Indiana Jones." The family moved to Houston about the time Jeff started kindergarten. A few years later, his parents enrolled him in the Vanguard program, a magnet program for gifted children, at River Oaks Elementary School. Attending this school for bright kids required a 20-mile commute each way. The school now boasts about the fact that Jeff Bezos is an alumnus, along with journalist Linda Ellerby and John Gray, the author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And yes, he was a bookworm. Or perhaps he was showing his hyper-competitive personality at a very young age when, in the 4th grade, he got excited by a contest at school to see who could read the most Newbery Award-winning books in a year. He plowed through 30 of them. One of his favorites was A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle, but still didn't win. Kids in that school read a lot of books. The school also gave him his first taste of computing. A company in Houston supplied his school with a computer terminal. There were no personal computers in those days, and loaned the school excess time in the company's mainframe. The terminal was connected to the mainframe by an acoustic phone modem with a cradle that held the phone handset in order to establish the connection. The setup came with a stack of manuals, but no one at the school knew how to use it. Jeff and a couple other students stayed after class to go through the manuals and figure out how to program it, but that novelty only lasted about a week. Then they discovered that the mainframe contained a primitive Star Trek game. From then on, all they used the computer for was playing Star Trek, each taking on a role of one of the characters of the TV program. Like all his other nerdy friends, he considered the choice role in the game to be that of Mr. Spock. Captain Kirk was the backup choice. If Jeff couldn't get either of those roles, he preferred to take on the persona of the starship's computer. One day, a local writer named Julie Ray visited the school to observe the classroom. She was writing a locally published book titled Turning On Bright Minds, A Parent Looks at Gifted Education in Texas, which, for some unknown reason, is not on Amazon.com. 12-year-old Jeff was chosen as one of the clever children she decided to follow through a typical school day. She referred to him using the pseudonym Tim. One of the stories that impressed her was his fascination with a device called the Infinity Cube, one of those things that schools for gifted children buy to turn on bright minds. The cube was lined with mirrors positioned in constantly shifting angles by small motors, so that an object placed in the cube could be re-reflected in myriad images and patterns, creating the illusion of looking into infinity. Jeff loved looking into the cube and wanted one of his own. But, he explained, since his mother thought $20 was too expensive for the toy, he decided to build one himself. He bought his own mirrors and rigged up motors to reproduce the Infinity Cube. As he explained to Ray, "The way the world is, someone could tell you to press the button." But he added, "You have to be able to think for yourself." In the book, she described Tim as friendly but serious, and marked by general intellectual excellence. But she also noted that his teachers described him as not particularly gifted in leadership. Perhaps that was because he was a self-sufficient nerd who tended to amuse himself. Like many nerds of the 20th century, he preferred to sit in his room or his local library, his mind buried in the fantasy world of science fiction. He read all the classics, from Robert Heinlein to Isaac Asimov to Frank Herbert and Ray Bradbury. In Cthulhu, most of the books in the tiny little Andrew Carnegie-style library were donated by local residents, and one of them was a huge science fiction fan who donated his entire collection. Jeff was also fond of reading about Thomas Edison and Walt Disney, two of his entrepreneurial heroes. In an interview with the Academy of Achievement, a nonprofit organization dedicated to connecting students with the greatest thinkers and achievers of the age, he recalled, "I have always been interested in inventors and invention." He admired Edison as the incredible inventor, and Disney as a real pioneer and inventor, with such big visions that no single individual could ever pull them off, unlike a lot of things that Edison worked on. Walt Disney really was able to get a big team of people working in a concerted direction. His biggest problem was that he once lost his library privileges for laughing too loud, which was really inconvenient for me. He never minded being grounded for getting in trouble because his mother would send him to his room, where he would happily read. In order to get him to socialize more with other kids, his parents enrolled him in a youth league team in the highly competitive Texas sport of football. Short and slightly built, he barely made the weight limit, and his mother worried that he would get creamed. But whatever he lacked in natural leadership ability, he made up for in intelligence. Within 2 weeks he had managed to memorize all the plays, including the roles of all 11 kids in his squad, and the coach put that skill to use by naming him defensive captain. When he was 13, the family moved to Pensacola, Florida, and to Miami 18 months later. As soon as he entered Miami Palmetto Senior High School in the Miami suburb of Pinecrest, one of Florida's top schools, he told classmates he intended to be valedictorian. Intimidated by his intellect, competitive nature, and self-confidence, they believed him. He was always a formidable presence, recalled high school friend Joshua Weinstein. His first summer job during high school wasn't exactly a world-changing occupation. He was a fry cook at McDonald's. But even while flipping burgers and lifting fries in and out of the vat of boiling oil, he made it a point to study the improvements in automation made by the burger chain. He was later to note, "Now the French fries raise themselves out of the oil, which, let me tell you, is a major technological innovation." Pinecrest was also where he met Ursula Uschi Werner in his junior year. The summer after he finished high school, he and Uschi decided it was time to be their own bosses. They dreamed up their own business, the Dream Institute, an awkward acronym for Directed Reasoning Methods, a 2-week-long summer learning camp for 5th graders. For $150 per student, they taught about fossil fuels and fission, interstellar travel and the prospect of space colonies, black holes and electric currents, and the more mysterious areas of television and advertising. In their own advertising flyer for parents printed on Jeff's dot matrix printer, the budding entrepreneurs explained, "Our program emphasizes the use of new ways of thinking in old areas." Their venture made the newspapers. One Wednesday in July 1982, a reporter for the Miami Herald visited Jeff's home to observe the class. Students Christina, Mark, Howard, Merrill, and James had gathered in Jeff's comfortable carpeted bedroom as they did each weekday morning at 9. That day they had readings from Gulliver's Travels, Watership Down, and 3 newspaper articles, one about bass dying from pollution, another on President Reagan's foreign policy, and a third about nuclear proliferation. Jeff then gave a short talk about his family's Apple II computer. During a discussion of Gulliver's Travels, one student, James, raised a question. If the Lilliputians were so tiny compared to Gulliver, wouldn't it take them several generations to decapitate him? Jeff and Uschi seemed to do an impressive job, and the students enjoyed the class. James, who was about to enter 5th grade, said he was learning little neat things that I really think are neat. We study about black holes in outer space. We study about stars. We learned that 1 teaspoon of a neutron star would weigh 10 billion tons. He told the reporter that the Dream Institute was better than school. In school, you're getting a grade. Whenever you're getting a grade for something, you always feel slightly pressured. His classmate, Merrill, also liked the informality of the classes. "You can call him Jeff instead of Mr. Bezos," he said. "It's like having a big brother teach you." Jeff and Uschi boasted that in just 2 weeks they could open new pathways of thought in their students. "We don't just teach them something," said Jeff. "We ask them to apply it." Uschi added that they decided to teach 5th graders because that age is pretty creative, but also intelligent enough to understand how things work. And, they assured the reporter, they refused to make the mistake of the many teachers who underestimate their students' abilities. "You have to shock them into thinking they can do more than they think they can," said Uschi. Although Uschi was a year ahead of Jeff, they seemed made for each other. Both were valedictorians of their graduating classes. Uschi went on to win a full scholarship to Duke University and a Rhodes Scholarship. During his high school career, Jeff attended the Student Science Training Program at the University of Florida, became a National Merit Scholar, and won the Best Science Student Award 3 years running and Best Math Student Award twice. He won a science prize in the prestigious Silver Knight competition for South Florida high school students, sponsored by the Miami Herald. His real passion was to follow his grandfather's impressively trodden path into space science. In 2003, the by-then wealthy Bezos announced that he was funding a program called Blue Origin, which is designing a spacecraft to give tourists a ride to the fringes of the atmosphere. He told Wired magazine, "The only reason I'm interested in space is because NASA inspired me when I was 5 years old." In high school, he also won a NASA competition by writing a paper titled "The Effect of Zero Gravity on the Aging Rate of the Common Housefly." There's no word on how he got the fly into zero gravity. For that, he was shuttled to NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama for a visit. What Star Trek fan could ask for more? Jeff was, in fact, obsessed with the prospect of space travel. Science fiction wasn't just a form of entertainment. To him, it elevated his thoughts to the future. In his valedictorian speech, he stood up and called for the colonization of space, believing it to be humanity's destiny. He wanted to preserve the Earth and turn it into a national park once its human inhabitants had left. After archaeology, he has said his second career choice was to be an astronaut. Still, asked by Time magazine in 2001 when he first got interested in computers, he responded, "That was a love affair that really did start in the 4th grade." Rudolf Werner, the father of Jeff's high school sweetheart, Uschi, later recalled that Jeff's fascination with space was part of a larger goal. He said the future of mankind is not on this planet, because we might be struck by something, and we better have a spaceship out there, he said. Uschi even joked that Jeff simply wanted to become a billionaire so he could afford to build his own space station. When a reporter for Wired magazine asked him about these lofty goals, Bezos first laughed, but he sobered to answer the question. "I wouldn't mind helping in some way," he said. "I do think we have all our eggs in one basket." Like most high school romances, the relationship between Jeff and Uschi didn't survive their college years. She returned to Duke, and he headed for Princeton to continue a formidable academic career. The apocryphal story is that Jeff discovered at Princeton that he wasn't always the best at everything, leading him to switch from a major in physics to computer science. The way Jeff told the story to Wired magazine many years later, quantum mechanics ended his physics career. Suddenly he discovered he was no longer at the top of the class in every subject. "One of the great things Princeton taught me is that I'm not smart enough to be a physicist," he said in a rare moment of humility. He did, however, join a Princeton group called Students for the Exploration and Development of Space. But he must have changed his mind sometime between graduating from high school and starting college, because in June 1982, just after he graduated from high school, the Miami Herald published an article about Florida valedictorians. In that article, Jeff's stated goal, according to the paper, was to study electrical engineering and business administration at Princeton, which was almost precisely what he did. His degree was in computer science and electrical engineering. He had a special affinity for computers. Jeff the nerd loved programming. At Princeton, he has said, "I was taking all the computer classes, and actually not just learning how to hack, but learning about algorithms and some of the mathematics behind computer science, and it's fascinating. It's really a very involving and fun subject." He has re-emphasized his love of computing in other interviews. "I always had a facility with computers. I always got along well with them, and they're such extraordinary tools. You can teach them to do things, and then they actually do them. It's kind of an incredible tool that we've built here in the 20th century." In this field, he ended up with enough A-pluses at Princeton to earn a 4.2 GPA and membership in Phi Beta Kappa. For his thesis, he designed a computer system to calculate DNA sequences, a method geneticists use to find variations in sequences of genetic code, but also used to find variations in other software programs and data, including financial information. During summer vacations from Princeton, he immediately began showing off his programming skills. In the summer of 1984, his father's job at Exxon had taken the family temporarily to Norway. So Jeff joined them and took a summer job at Exxon as a programmer, developing a computer model on an IBM 4341 mainframe computer to calculate oil royalties for the firm. The following summer, he traveled to Silicon Valley for a job at IBM's Santa Teresa Research Center in San Jose. In his resume, he boasted that he rewrote an IBM computer interface, a project for which he was allocated 4 weeks, but which he completed in 3 days. Few people remember much about him in his Princeton years, despite several extracurricular activities. He joined the Quadrangle Club, an eating club headed by David Risher, who later became a marketing executive at Amazon. But all Risher remembers about Jeff Bezos, the college student, was that he liked to play beer pong, a drinking game that involves batting ping-pong balls into cups of beer. Jeff wasn't much of a ladies' man. Perhaps Princeton women aren't into beer pong. He explained his own romantic shortcomings this way. "I'm not the kind of person where women say, 'Oh, look how great he is,' a half hour after meeting me. I'm kind of goofy, and it's not the kind of thing where people are going to say about me, 'Oh my God, this is what I've been looking for.'" Another classmate, E.J. Chichelnisky, would bump into him occasionally, but today can recall nothing more than that he was bright and motivated and organized. Still, Bezos made enough of an impression to later inspire Chichelnisky to recommend Bezos to his mother, Graciela Chichelnisky, when she started looking for smart computer scientists to join her fledgling network communications company, Fitel. That was to be the start of a meteoric career for the young computer scientist.